Matthew, welcome to Locked In, man. It's a pleasure having you. Another Massachusetts guest. The crowd loves the Massachusetts guests. I love them because of the accent, that Boston accent. I think it just makes the storytelling even better, more real and authentic for whatever reason. But welcome and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. My pleasure also. And it's an honor to be here.
And I wanted to plug your business in the beginning of this episode. And it's perfect right around the holidays, the winter season for what you do. So, you have the floor if you want to explain to the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Murray Tree. It's out of South Shore, Massachusetts. We've been around for a long time, almost 4 decades. It's been a multi-generational family business. And we're a smaller company, but we kind of custom tailor to our customers, and we have a good reputation, and we stand behind our work. We do a good job, and we like what we do.
That's awesome. And did you grow up there?
I did. Yeah, I grew up I was born in the same town. I grew up my whole life in Weymouth, Mass. I was born at South Shore Hospital back in 1985, and lived in the town right up until I was about 25. And I still live in a town very close by. And Weymouth was a blue-collar town, and it was a good town to grow up in, and we knew a lot of people in the town and played sports with a lot of kids in the town, and everybody kind of gelled, and it was a good town to grow up in.
Who'd you grow up with?
So I had a lot of friends. I had my family consisted of my brother and I, and he's about 3 years older than me, and but we both played the same sports, and there was a lot of families in Weymouth where my brother would play sports with, would play sports with brothers and sisters, or ages, and so we knew everybody, and we were kind of known as the tree guys, and my father was the tree guy. And if you needed a tree taken down in Weymouth or anything pruned or trimmed, we would get called. And so that's just always how it's been. It kind of ran in my blood a little bit. Right from the time I was born, I was on tree jobs. Our backyard was full of wood. It was kind of our playground. So,
when I was a kid, I used to love seeing those tree guys around our community where we grew up, and I would get Lincoln logs, like with the stem and everything, and then I had Playmobil, and it had like guys with chainsaws, so I'd pretend like I was a tree cutter, like building these intricate sets, like kind of like Legos, in my playroom with my brother.
Right.
And that's what I was into that, and then I wanted to become a FBI agent after the fire department and this and that.
Right.
Brought back a lot of childhood memories right there.
Yeah.
Were you and your brother close growing up?
We were, yeah. We and we still are. We've always, had a good relationship, and we hung around like our whole lives, and we just played sports with each other, and we've worked with each other, and we've both, gone on to marry and have children, and we have a good relationship. He's a fireman, and we still work together and see each other and have a good relationship.
What were some values your parents taught you as a kid growing up?
So both of my parents, they were extremely hard workers. My mom and my dad. My mom owned a gymnastics school when she was 18 years old. She was a great gymnast herself, and she went on to own a gym school. And she had a partner in the business. They're still best friends to this day. And she always worked a couple of jobs too. She would waitress. She would work for my dad's business. She went on to become a personal trainer and a yoga instructor. And she just always had a lot of things going on. She's a go-getter and a very hard worker. And she was a great mother too. She did, our whole family's laundry. She did my brother and I's financial aid forms, and we probably wouldn't have gone to college if it wasn't for her. And my life could have taken a serious turn in a different direction if it hadn't been for her. My dad was a great guy too, and he was more risque, I would say, and he came from a different background. My mom and my dad were like polar opposites, and not in any sort of a bad way, but just more of like you got to take some risk to reap any reward. And everything we did was, there's always a lot of risk, whether it be, physical, dangerous job, or you could, damage property. And we just, he did that. That was his business, and we just learned it. And, we took on that kind of ability to assume risk and manage it and be okay with it. And I think out of my mom and my dad, my brother and I inherently, received qualities of like leaders and people that weren't afraid to be leaders or to make a decision when needed to. And that quality has always kind of been a good quality, I would consider it. And it's been valuable. But it also, too, when you're not afraid to be out front, you kind of take some heat and whatnot. So it comes with, positives and negatives. But my father, he was a tree guy, for many years. And I want to say in his mid-30s, he took a job at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Department, and he was a correctional officer.
Wow.
And so that's kind of interesting, knowing that. But I was young at that time, I was like, I forget exactly. I want to say I was like, I was probably around 10 years old. So I grew up my whole, from 10 on, hearing what the insides of a jail facility is like, the stories of his encounters of, with inmates, and it was very unorthodox. My father was a very unorthodox corrections officer, and he had success in the business. Like he was good at that job, and he did it for many years, and he hired like a huge percentage of inmates to work for his business when they'd be released. And that went on to create some controversy between him and the administration of the jail.
Why did your dad get into corrections? Did he ever tell you?
No. And, just delivering it to you straight, my sense of, or my answer to that would be, it was a job that he was well suited for, and he had that ability to be kind to people that were in tough situations. They weren't there. He understood that his job was not to judge or punish that person. It's already happened. They already saw a judge. The judge sentenced them to this facility. And my father's job was just to run the facility. And he did that with like a respect for the inmates, and the inmates respected him, and it worked smoothly. And he developed almost like he was their friend. And his units, like he just didn't do, he almost rebelled slightly against like the, norms and routines that corrections officers adhered to for many reasons. And he still had success, meaning like the units would run safely and smoothly. And he didn't write reports. He didn't do cell shakedowns. He would take the information like an ADS relayed to him at roll call that he wanted to go in. The ADS wanted him to go into the unit, go into each cell and extract peanut butter jars. And he would look at the ADS and say, I'm not doing that. I'm not going in there and ripping their cells apart to take peanut butter jars. Not going to do it. And, that would create issues. And another incident he had, or not an incident, actually, a situation that he explained to me. And knowing it, I think it's kind of cool of him that he did this, because he cared about what the quality of life that the people that were living in there and how he could impact it. And I saw firsthand a lot of corrections officers that may have taken pleasure in going in to do that kind of work. And that's, they're coming into a space that's like, we have so few things that are ours, though, that are even important to us. And like when you start to disrespect them or search through them and just you lose that, it's the only thing you have left. It becomes pretty personal. And so my father understood all that stuff, and he understood kind of the quality of life that you're living in that environment. And they would tell him, for instance, we want you to go in and get radios. In one part of the jail, they weren't allowed to have radios. In the pre-release, they were. So they would the radios would come over into the other part, and they would go in and shake down and take the radios. So my father would go into the unit and call everybody out. And I guess he was kind of known to do that, like bring everybody out and talk to them collaboratively. And he would say, listen, the administration wants me to come in and shake this whole place up and find radios, okay? So why don't you guys as a whole get me 3 or 4 radios, take all the parts off them that you want, keep anything that's good, give me a bunch of something that I can go out and show that I went through and got some radios out of here and everybody's happy, And that's how he conducted himself. And right down to, we all know in jails and prisons that there's fights. And, my father would encounter that and deal with it by having the inmates shake hands. And it would be over. And there would be no reports written. But the problem was, the cameras come on to the scene and this and that. Now you got things on camera. They check. They know there was an incident. There's no report that matches the incident. So it was getting tough for him to survive in that job that way, And he just kind of refused to evolve into like, he had so many instances that I could describe where he'd have an altercation with the property officer because an inmate came into his unit that didn't get what he was supposed to get. And my dad would go down to get him the personal stuff on his own time, on break time. And the officer wouldn't want to relinquish the property, and my father would ask him if he planned on taking it home and selling it at a yard sale or something, like it's for the inmates and I'm getting it for an inmate. And that was happening just all the time. And he had more issues with the administrators than he did with the general population,
Hey guys, it's Ian, and I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. The holidays are all about traditions, and for me, they've taken on a new meaning. Ever since coming home from prison, I've valued those moments more than ever, like putting up the Christmas tree, decorating, and just spending time with the people who matter most. These are memories I want to hold on to forever, and this year, I'm making sure they last by sharing them through an Aura digital picture frame, which I have right here. I ordered my Aura digital picture frame, and I love it. Gonna have some photos in and around the office and at my apartment. If you're stumped like me on what to get a loved one for the holidays, this is the perfect solution. It's quick, easy, and inexpensive with my discount. Aura frames aren't like the clunky digital frames of the past. They're sleek, modern, and unbelievably simple to use. No USBs, no SD cards, no hassles. I hate all of those things. Just beautiful memories shared instantly. And with unlimited storage, I can load up years of photos and videos of my favorite moments. It's no wonder Aura is named the best digital picture frame by Wirecutter, The Strategist, and Wired. If you're looking for the perfect gift this holiday season, Aura frames are a no-brainer. You could save $35 on Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames by visiting auraframes.com and using my exclusive promo code LOCKEDIN at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code LOCKEDIN, your favorite podcast, for $35 off. Make sure to order in time for the holidays. Terms and conditions apply. Whether it's reliving cherished traditions or starting new ones, Aura Frames lets you share your favorite holiday moments with the people who matter most. So what memory will you share first? And guys, I don't know about you, but my iPhone runs out of memory for photos and videos all the time. I don't have to worry about it with Aura Frames' unlimited photo storage data. Grab yours today. Hit that link in the description of this episode. Now let's get back into it. When your dad would share these stories with you at that young age, what was like your interpretation of prison, the criminal justice system? What were your thoughts on that? Because, you know, growing up, we're watching when you come from like a good family like that, when you're not surrounded by people that have been affected by the criminal justice system directly in your immediate family, it's kind of like a taboo topic. It's an oddball out. So you watch it from movies and TV shows, and you automatically associate it with prison equals bad people, drugs, murderers, rapists. So what were your thoughts at that time period?
So that's a good question. And to be honest with you, I had this vision. I had this vision of what prison looked like, or jails. And it necessarily didn't match what I thought. It was different. And, we have these stereotypical visions of jails from whatever we see on television, and so I had never seen the jail I ended up in on television, so I didn't know what to picture or what it was like. I just heard these wild, bizarre, crazy stories. And I also had a little bit of a different experience as a childhood interpreting those stories, because I actually got to see it, a little bit of it. I was working for my father for the business, so there were occasions where I would stop at the jail on the way home from a job that we finished, knowing that he was working that night, and I'd stop in there and I'd walk right into the pre-release, and I would be sitting as close as I am to you, to inmates. And I'd be like, hey, Dad, what's going on? And just regular walking around. It was kind of like I was always, I think myself, I was introduced and brought closer to that environment than most people. So I had a more accurate understanding. I didn't have that prejudicial, bad person, taboo experience. I, from a young age, was associating with people that were incarcerated. I worked alongside them for my dad's business, and my dad and my mother both welcomed a lot of inmates into our home to eat Easter dinner with us, and it was like we didn't talk about them or look at them like they were bad. And I thought that was kind of cool. That definitely stuck with me my whole life, and it was huge, seeing that. My dad would bring cigarettes and jeans and work boots to a halfway house, and drop them off for a guy. Pick them up every day and drop them off every day from work, 3 or 4 cities away. And he had a big heart for, people in this situation. And it was a good, I think, a good lesson to raise children that way, and to show them that you can walk anywhere in life and be surrounded by anybody and find comfort, find friends, find business it's everywhere. It's all around, and it's through every person. And I think my parents did a good job of kind of showing us that, with real life examples. For example, there were times where I would call the jail to speak to my father, and I would call directly to his unit, and I would be on the phone with inmates, talking to them, guys that I had just been working with a month ago, and that were back in. And so I saw it my whole life. It was kind of interesting, But I can say kind of the most interesting thing, or the area in which I was the most wrong, I never thought I'd go there. So that was really kind of wild to me.
Isn't it crazy to reflect back on it? Like to
Yeah.
think as a kid, no one expects to go to prison. You know, at some point, I know like I'll interview like say a drug dealer who knows the only options are prison or death at the end. But
Sure.
before that, there was a time period where in their mind, they never expected to be where they were going to be. And I think that's just very powerful in itself.
Huge.
And it also kind of shows you how life in the universe, like maybe for some reason your dad took that job and, you know, it just happened to be that you ended up following that path on the other end and that helped your parents show compassion towards you.
Sure.
And in some, you know, universe. It's interesting to always hear the backstory, and that's what we were talking about prior to sitting down here. I think that's the incredible aspect of, you know, of these stories.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's important.
Sure. Yeah, it was, I think a lot of things have happened for specific reasons. And another issue or another point I'd like to kind of touch upon is I followed up my education after high school at a college in Massachusetts called Mass Maritime. And it's a maritime academy, and you go out on ships. And so I had a professor there my freshman year. And your freshman year, they make you take a variety of a couple different majors to kind of see what you like. And there's two majors that go out to sea, engine and deck. So I had this professor, and he was what you would call in that industry like real salty. You know, he was kind of stern and miserable. And he would say to us all the time, now, meanwhile, we're freshmen in college, you know, and you got your head shaved, you got long socks on, you're going to run everywhere on campus. It's like a paramilitary academy. It's not a fun college experience like most people experience at college. So anyhow, this guy would say to us all the time, you're responsible for your own entertainment. And we'd all look at him like he had like 9 heads, you know, and be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And he'd say it all the time. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. It doesn't even make sense to me. It doesn't mean whatever. Well, when I went to jail, it all clicked. To me, I knew I could get through my sentence or do my time because I was on a ship. There was like so many parallels, you know. When you're on a ship, you're floating out in the ocean. You can't leave it. Can't get off it. You're with maybe a crew of 20 guys that you don't know. You might not like them. You might like some of them. You might get along. You know, it's very similar from being in jail. And when he said you're responsible for your own entertainment, you got to get yourself through each day. And however you do that, through reading or exercise or meditation or, you know, whatever it may be, it all clicked when I was in jail. And I often reflect back upon my education, which is supposed to be to propel you into a career, but mine propelled me into making sure I could be okay getting through my sentence. And they're equally valuable, because if I couldn't get through my sentence, I can't do the rest of my life. And I firmly believe and got to see tangibly what a sentence can do to someone's rest of their life. And so I think I have a kind of an interesting, unique lens or perspective into the whole kind of situation, given the fact that, like, my dad worked there. You know, I heard the stories. I worked with guys that were frequently incarcerated, you know, and then to go on and be there and get that full experience of being in there and whatnot. It's kind of a unique situation and interesting.
Prior to your arrest that would send you to prison, had you had any encounters with law enforcement, and had your family, maybe your brother, or had anybody been arrested?
Sure. We had a couple of minor things, you know, my brother, myself. Kind of standard, typical teenage, maybe minor in possession of alcohol or disorderly conduct or something, like maybe a continue without finding, like minor things, but like we weren't squeaky clean. We weren't perfect little, we lived life and we were blue collar and we definitely experienced but we weren't like so desensitized to crime and police. And, I had a firm belief that police were there to protect you and that's who you called when you needed protection. And my views and opinions on that today aren't all the same. And, for many reasons. And we can get into that further, but my experience with the law up until my accident that got me incarcerated was I didn't take it too seriously. I kind of had that ignorant or arrogant approach that, like, I'm not a criminal. I'm not from a crime-ridden neighborhood. I'm of that socioeconomic, privileged white background that, we know a couple people down the courthouse so we can have someone help, maybe, and they'll continue without finding, or it'll be okay. We'll get, it'll not go away, but not much to worry about. And that's kind of how I just looked at everything. But, maybe I'll jump right into what got me incarcerated because it kind of explains a lot of my behaviors, leading up to and post. I, through high school, I was like, you're maybe on the younger or one of the first people to experiment or start using alcohol regularly, and I was definitely an alcoholic before I drank. I remember those feelings of like you drink and you feel kind of good about it, and it's like you ever, even if you maybe threw up or got into a little scuffle or something, it was still a good experience. You liked it. I was ready to do it again and again and again, and I had those isms and whatnot, and ultimately it led me to what happened. But before I get there, I had success in life, like on many different platforms or to different capacities, whether it be academically or athletically or even entrepreneurially. I can say I think I kind of parallel you a little bit. And I saw a lot of similarities when I was listening to what you explained and how you kind of traversed your childhood and some of the things you did. I was like, well, yeah, I was doing like very similar things. And from young ages, like selling snacks and drinks and stuff at my older brother's sporting events, and even like 5, 6 years old, going to BJ's, buying Snickers bars and Gatorades and whatnot. So I always had that drive of like to make a buck, and it was I had success on many different levels, like especially athletically. My brother and I both were good athletes. We both had a lot of opportunity. We both played in elite levels and teams and whatnot. And my brother, his kind of predominant sport was hockey, and mine was lacrosse, although we both played both. So I stayed in public schools. My brother went to private school. And that was also kind of that was kind of derived from the private school he went to being, not like the number one hockey school in the area. And my public school was well known for lacrosse. So I didn't have any interest in leaving my public school. I was happy with it, and played 3 sports through high school. Was a captain of 2 of them. I was a junior captain. I was an All-American in lacrosse my senior year. So there was success in these levels, and all the meanwhile, I was already drinking alcoholically. And I only mention this because my input into all these things wasn't at its full potential. It was definitely stymied due to my young, start to alcohol. It was detracting already from, positive things that I should have been focusing on or putting more importance on. And so I can definitely say that was, in effect, but I think my mental grit trumped it for a long time, or I was able to at least still garnish some success, but I was working super hard all the time because I had to make up for that. So I was putting myself at a disadvantage from the get-go, and I look back on it a while and go, wow, man, that could have been so much easier, But I give myself credit at the same time because I stuck it out, you know what I mean? But if you look at me on paper, you look at things like I'm not reflective of who I am by my grades and stuff because I didn't even try. I was drinking and partying instead of studying. And soon, not that long into it, the loss, the signpost, all that stuff started coming, which just makes things harder and harder and harder. And, I failed to yield at every signpost. And ultimately, what it transpired into was a vehicular homicide. And a girl whom I went to high school with, we were 25 at the time, and her life was cut short due to me being behind the wheel drunk. And it was a single vehicle accident. I rolled over on a road in Weymouth where I lived and where she lived and where we went to high school. And that was the incident that stopped everything in its tracks. My life, her life, many family members' lives. And it was a tough time and still is to this day, And, but there's been so many things that have happened, and so much stuff. And sometimes you sit back and, I know that this, to me, was make or break. I can either do it or I can't. And that it will tell me, but I got to listen and I got to pay attention. And I think I've done that since. And there's been a lot. It's been tough. It's been really hard. But it's, it's life. And every decision will either bring you somewhere or it will change the trajectory of where you're going or where you want to go. And, I'm fortunate, I'm grateful, and I'm happy that I am here today. And for whatever purpose it may be and whatever it leads to. But I got to take this situation in my life and I have to, like I said earlier, listen to it and let it lead and go where it should go. And, that is why I'm here today in this exact location, not just in generality, but, I feel and I listen to what is going on in me, and there's a lot of energy and potential that sits and I take my accident, my incarceration, the massive loss, the trauma, everything that come out of it, and I look at it like a huge burning ball of energy. You can take whatever you want out of it. There's a lot in there. It's good, bad, everything. What's the fastest way through it? Right through it. Go over it, around it. It's all going to take more time. You might not get the energy because you didn't go through it. So, a lot of this stuff is metaphorically speaking, but it's been tangible. And I think in life I didn't understand the importance, or I didn't take things serious as enough because I had never felt some sort of like real tangible consequence. And maybe I was, just young and dumb. Maybe I hadn't grown up. I don't know what it is, but this situation made me stop for once. And that was the first time, I enjoyed moving fast, doing a lot of things, being in a lot of places, and, what I thought was enjoying, but it was a rude awakening,
What decision could have been changed that day? Was it, the place where you were drinking? Was it your choice to get behind the wheel? What could have been, changed to affect that outcome?
So, a million things, even little things could have changed the outcome. But ultimately, I try not to even compile all the little things because that can kind of drive one nuts. And I look at it more in a sense of like it was meant to be. It was no pretentious like elephant in the room. No, it was due to my alcoholism. It was due to repeated bad decisions. And it's tough to talk about and admit, but I have to because it's reality and it's what got me there. And if I act like it didn't happen, then maybe it will repeat. But I was known to be like the good drunk driver. In Weymouth, where I grew up, and I talk about this with I'm not putting any emphasis of like it was cool or it's a good thing to do, but in Weymouth, where I grew up, if there was no house party or woods party on a Friday or Saturday night, it was very common for us to 5 or 6 people drive around in a car and drink for 4 or 5 hours. And that to me sounds totally just stupid and asinine today, but that's what we did. And it was common for the cops to pull you over and tell you to go home or pour your beer out or maybe put it in their own trunk or we'd run from the cops if we were at a woods party. And it was almost built into part of the enjoyment. It was like, again, back to not really taking things serious. It was like, it's just part of the flow. And that was common every Friday, Saturday night, summers. So it kind of took on its own, energy. And before I know it, I was drinking alcoholically. And that decision to get in a car and drink after being drunk, I look at it like this, like I did it so many times. And I was reckless. I was, I put other people's lives in danger. And that's not cool. That's not something to be like proud of or, or something I would want my daughter or my son to experience, someone else doing that to them. And so there's a lot, that comes out of it. There's a lot to be learned, a lot to be said. And the only thing I could control was my accountability or my responsibility and the way I go forward. What's happened has happened. And I think that by trying to be a good human is the only way I can redeem or, forgive myself and live a productive life and not go into a convenience store and not want anyone to know who I am or to see me or to want to curl up in a shell, and hide from the world. But to be able to look people in the eye and hold your head high and stuff, there was a lot of lessons that came along with it. But on the contrary, I have to always, and I always maintain the losses suffered by the family of April, who, that was her name, April. They're unequal in every comparison, you know. You could have sentenced me, and I alluded to this in court. I said you could sentence me to 20 years, and there's not one stitch of fabric in my DNA that could utter the words that that's not fair. You know, she lost 75 years maybe, you know, the chance to get married, the chance for her dad to walk her down the aisle, her brothers to share nieces and nephews. It's so uneven, you know, and that to me is all that really matters, is what they lost, you know, was due to my decision making. And the only thing I could do worse now is not care or not feel that. So it's kind of my duty to care and to do anything I can from here forward to maybe help one person to change or to save one person's life or to, you know, be that voice in someone's head while they're at a party, maybe getting ready to go home. You know, that's all I can do. And I have to also talk not right now about like going through the trial. And, you know, it's a process. And it was a good 2-year process. And I was shaken up, flipped upside down, you know, didn't really know what was going on thoroughly. And her father was just like an amazing beacon of like compassion and empathy and love. And I can't say enough about him, that he was unbelievable. And, you know, her mom and her brothers were a little bit, you know, they didn't have the exact outward projection that the dad did. And I totally understood it. You know, I still to this day understand it. And I respect it. And if they were, let's say, even polarized on how they feel, I would respect it and understand it. And it makes sense to me. But their family has been amazing in how they were able to show compassion for me. And I mentioned the mother and the brothers not being as outwardly, but they were never like how I could imagine people may be in that situation. And they displayed a level of compassion and empathy and understanding in a time where I don't think I might have been able to. So that was, you know, impactful for me and helpful for me to heal and move through. And there was a time when I was released from jail. I was sentenced to 2.5 years in Plymouth County. And I was sentenced to Plymouth County because my father had worked at Norfolk County. And my accident actually took place in Weymouth, which is Norfolk County. But conflict of interest and that kind of stuff, they sent me to Plymouth, which what I found out was, you know, not a great alternative because of the structure and whatnot. It was it was kind of a bad hit, as they say in the in that industry. No movement, terrible food, just, differences in facilities that we learn about. And again, back to they change your quality of life when you're in there doing your time, what you can and can't do, and what you have access to and what not, and all that. So it was there was a time I think I was getting at was I was released, and back to thinking about, like, what do you do? How do you take this and do anything good with it? And my wife had an opportunity because she also went through something similar to me, and that was kind of our foundation when we met each other. We had something very similar, and that's her story, so I won't get too much into that. But we did have this similar experience, and she was speaking at the North Quincy High School, and we were living in North Quincy at the time. And again, right before the prom season, which is an impressionable time for that age of kids, and at that time in their life, they're getting ready to kind of head off and start, whatever they may be starting. And that was kind of, I remember that feeling so well. And, I didn't have too much time after that until I really, threw a bomb into my own life and others. And so she had this opportunity to go speak to the seniors graduating, and I called April's dad the night before, and talk about like a last minute, invite. I asked him if he wanted to go and speak to the kids with me, and he took the offer up, and he brought his brother, and so we go the following day to the high school, and there was a group of I think it was a group of 5. It was my wife and her victim in her accident. He lost his leg, and he was there, and her, and myself and Mr. Ivel, and there was a woman there that lost her son, who he had froze to death after he left a party drinking, and irrelevant to my story, but sad, and it was a collective message to these impressionable kids of, here's some real life examples of what can happen if you don't, take it seriously and be responsible. And so it was again tough for me to do it and follow through with it and be there, but rewarding and feels great to do. And it was a good result. It went really well. And I got to say, again, back to her dad, and just the level of man he is, he showed it every time he could. And his brother come up to me and said to me, without him being present, his brother, so April's uncle, gave me a hug and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, my brother, he said to me that if he could adopt you, he would." And again, it's emotional, because it's like, how could this man be like that, And, but that in itself delivered a lesson to me that you can't get anywhere. You can't get into college. You can't, you know what I mean? That's it's tough. But, when I feel something that hard, I know it's that good. It's that powerful. It's that strong. It's worth that feeling. And he just did that over and over. And even right up to on stage, I spoke before him. And he kind of just last minute off the cuff came up to me and said, "Hey, at the end of your story, don't tell them that I'm here." And I'm like, all right. So I told my whole story, and I didn't say anything. And he walked out and he hugged me on stage and started his story with, I'm her dad. And again, it was just, tough, but stuff that I'm glad that I did. And I'm glad that I didn't shell up, and hide, because there's no need to. And it's hard to do what your heart tells you to do sometimes, but you got to keep going. You got to do it. And I think this accident, in a selfish way, I have to be grateful for it, because it's going to push me in life to follow what I think I should follow and not what other people think I should follow.
What were your thoughts and what was going through your mind in the moments after the accident?
Another good question. Geez, I should be able to tell you so easily, but I almost have to speculate, because I think that I honestly, I know this sounds funny, this answer, but I was like outside of my own self at that time. That's the only way I can describe it. I feel like I wasn't even me. I remember where I was. I remember what I did. I remember everything I saw. It was a tough scene. I mean, I had just rolled over a truck. She was, April had suffered some, serious injuries. And I just remember being there and knowing how the weight of what was unfolding. But I can honestly say, and I wouldn't want it to be confused with like me trying to control a narrative or anything. This is just real, raw, my feelings and what I remember. I remember, like I said, being almost outside of myself. And I remember just saying, holy shit, like what the F is going on? This is real. And I just remembered, obviously, and I didn't, it was fast paced, because I gotta say, I was like praying for a miracle. I knew, I didn't for 1 second think run. I didn't for 1 second think like protect me. I knew I was, stick a fork in me, I'm done. I knew I was going to jail. I knew I was responsible for this. And the only thing at that moment that mattered to me was to get medical professionals here as fast as possible. So I did what I could do to try to help, all while I called 911 like 3 times, I think. And that, there was nothing good that had come out of this. Or there's no way I would ever want this to happen again. The feelings and the pain and the stuff that I know that my actions caused is like, it's very hard to wrap your head around it and think about it, but that is real. And that family really experienced that. And my family really experienced it. Although 2 different experiences, there was so many people affected. And I just remember thinking in the seconds after, I got to get help. She needs help. If there's anybody that can help, it's like 911. It's the ambulance. We need to get to a hospital. So I called and what was a minute or 2 felt like an eternity. And it was just such a surreal feeling of just, I couldn't believe it. I didn't know how I was going to be able to live on, like knowing that that was me. It's my fault. And thinking about all the things that triggered, funeral services, that whole family's life, just like stopping in its tracks. And it's hard. It's so hard. And it was, imagine all of that going on at once. And you're just in control of nothing at that time. Like I felt every ounce of everything, and I accepted it, I think, like without any time. Like I knew. And I knew I was now in the control of the police, the custody of the police. I knew that there was just my whole life as I knew it was probably never going to be the same, and a lot of people's lives were never going to be the same. And from there, like I said, I was being told what to do, where to be, when to be for a long time, and life was on like a proverbial pause. Nothing could grow, nothing could prosper, no decisions could be made long term. And that was my first introduction to real, like, legal jeopardy.
What did they end up charging you with, and were you given bail?
I was given bail. I was charged with vehicular homicide, OUI, and there was a couple other charges that were listed on the citations and in the charging documents. However, that's a good point. And as I've been watching some of your previous episodes, I kind of make little notes and I see commonalities between people like us that have gone through the justice system and have been handed out justice. I didn't fully even understand my charges or what I just agreed to be sentenced to until I was into my incarceration. And I was learning terminology from other inmates and it's clicking in my head weeks and months after. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what my lawyer meant when he said he was going to get the 10-day on and after removed. And I had no clue what that meant. When he explained that to me the day I was being sentenced, there was a 10-day on and after. I had no idea that 10-day on and after would stipulate that I didn't receive parole, basically. It's a way of making a 2.5-year sentence mandatory without it being in the sentencing guidelines as a mandatory sentence. They can put it on and after, and you don't get eligibility on parole until you do your whole first sentence. So that was a way in which they would have, my sentence, if my lawyer didn't lawyer that out of there, I would have had to do my full 2.5 sentence before I would have been eligible for parole on my 10-day sentence. And I don't know if you know if it's different in feds or Massachusetts, but you're eligible for parole at half your sentence. So that is a way that they can take any sentence and make it mandatory.
Yeah, there's no parole in the feds anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. You're doing 85%.
85%.
Yeah, and then give or take halfway house and stuff.
Right.
It's a very different system.
Different, yeah. Yeah, and I've heard that, obviously with my dad being in the corrections, and then also Plymouth, where I was held, in a different kind of informative segment, they hold state, federal, county, and immigration inmates.
I actually just interviewed someone that spent a little time at Plymouth.
Yeah.
What was your family's reaction to this event? How did they respond to you, and what were those initial conversations like throughout, the proceedings?
They it was a very measured response. It was calm. Everybody seemed to understand that this wasn't a situation that we need to get like jacked up about or worked up. Like it was in motion, and it was kind of like, for lack of a better phrase, damage control. Like, I knew that I was going to jail or prison. My family knew it. Everyone knew it. And it was understood kind of like, when this happens, someone has to. So again, I have a different kind of, like you mentioned earlier, someone who's selling drugs, it's kind of like, that's a real calculation that you either fear or don't fear, or, and you make that decision, you kind of understand, okay, I'm going to do it. This is going to happen. Mine was a little different. I didn't know or plan or think this would ever happen, but it did. And my family accepted the fact, I think, that, I was going to jail, and, with the right attorney, and a pretty genuine defense, like not a, I didn't do this, it wasn't my fault. You know what I mean? It was like, yep, this happened. I'm responsible for it. I take responsibility for it. I'm not, and whatever you dole out is what I need to do. And my lawyer was awesome. He was a great, great lawyer. He was a professional boxer. And, I actually ended up starting to box in his gym while I was awaiting trial, through his recommendation, like a good way to just kind of keep your mind sharp and, stay focused and be in the best pristine condition you can be in mentally and physically, when you embark on this sentence. And at that time, I didn't know what it was going to be. So it was just interesting in all aspects, so much to digest in all aspects. And my lawyer was kind of like, a very realist, and he was kind of preparing me like for 3 to 5 or something like that. So my family, my mom was obviously, devastated, and my father, he knew I could take it and do it and move through it, and and my brother too. They were kind of like, hey, you got to do it. You do what you got to do. We know what you can do. We know what you're capable of, and like I didn't look at like jail, like, oh, I was gonna go in there and I'm gonna fight right when I get in there and stuff. Like, I went in there with an attitude of like, listen, I'm clean and sober. I haven't drank in a long time. I'm facing this head on. And there was a boxer that I had done some training with, and he was an older guy, and he'd hold the mitts for me and stuff. And he did some time. And a couple weeks before I was sentenced, he said something to me that stuck with me still to this day. And I laugh almost, and I have a smile when I say it. And it's just funny because he said, hey, kid, when you get in there, hang with the winners. And I was like, going to jail? How many winners is there going to be there, And when I did get there, it's a place full of people that not that I knew everybody so well, but there was a lot of decent people and a lot of regular people, and, a lot of people that also made bad decisions, maybe out of desperation. And it was just interesting when he said that you can hang with the winners no matter where you are. And I understood that as I started to kind of live in that environment, and like, who do you associate with? Who do you, interact with? And I tried to keep it to a minimum, intentionally. And I did that my whole time in there. And I think I did a pretty decent job of living in there in those environments and kind of avoiding any entanglements, with gambling or drinking or drugging or going to the stores and running up debt, and, just any way that you can get yourself into a hot, sticky situation, I kind of avoided it. And I just maintained, and I worked on myself, and I took it as an opportunity where, I again, back to one of your guests that you had interviewed, Mr.
Based, yeah.
He said something. He asked you a question during the interview. He says, "Did you have a lot of fun in there?" And I was listening, and I gotta say, I've often said to people that don't understand or can't understand or can't picture what it's like in there, I've often said to them, there could be a stabbing in the unit, or a fight, and within 15 minutes or the next day, everyone's laughing and joking and playing, and there's a lot of fun happening. And there's a lot of people that look like they're enjoying their stay. And so it's like it's a mixed it's a mixed bag of emotions in there, and it's kind of sad to see how comfortable people are in there, and but also too, that's like a resiliency effect you see, and it's kind of a good thing that people are in there laughing and joking, because if they weren't, then it would really be a worse place to be. So it's a keen environment, to have your antenna up all the time. My father would call it SA, situational awareness, and just paying attention and being aware. And it was quite an experience, and I relate it. If you've never gone to war, you really don't know what it's like to be in war, or, and that's an experience I'll never have, most likely. So my experience of going to jail doesn't have to be so negative. I can look at it. It's about how I look at it. It's not about how anyone else looks at it. That's their problem, how they look at it. My view on it is my experience is my experience, and it's something that some people will never experience. And that can be like a delicacy in a sense, like you'll never experience that. And you'll never get what good came out of it that I did. And it's an environment that, I don't recommend, and I wouldn't want people to go there. But just like my accident, that's a big ball of energy in there. You can learn, you can maybe work on yourself. When do you have an opportunity for years or multiple years, like shut off everything and kind of really stop and really pay attention to what you're doing? And that was definitely beneficial to do, and to kind of take a good look within and stop everything.
Now, I see how the community responds when there's a drunk driving accident and there's a fatality, on social media and the news. How is your community responding to you after this accident?
Interestingly enough, I did experience some of that, if it bleeds, it reads kind of effect. But in town, I would say, in our friendship groups and parents and whatnot, I was blessed, and I was fortunate enough that I think people knew me enough. They knew who I was, and they knew I wasn't a perfect angel and that I had made poor decisions, but I had a general level of respect, by my peers and my peers' parents and whatnot, and I don't have any issues with the, after effect or the way I was treated, or I can attest to the feelings. You feel that way no matter what. You feel like everyone's looking at you, and you feel like you don't even want to go into the convenience store, and and it can be. I can understand how that can be kind of a little bit debilitating. And post my accident, I also took advice and suggestions from people that maybe I wouldn't have, if this didn't have happened. Again, back to being kind of broken and ready to let somebody else tell me what to do. Because let's face it, up until that point, my decisions had gotten me to where I was. So I had to actually, for the first time, look at my decisions and say, okay, well, if your decision got you here, maybe you should listen to someone else. And I did. And I took some other people's advice, and my mom was kind of pivotal or critical in the first person she asked me if I would go speak to was he was a pastor at a church that my grandmother was, she had her services there. And my grandmother had a real strong liking for this pastor. And so my mother said to me, I'd like you to go up and speak with him. And I said, okay. And the only thing I knew about this man was that he was a pastor at this church that my grandmother liked, and he was a former state police officer, and he was a former professional baseball player. And I, for some reason, just thought, that's kind of a cool mix of like, this guy must be kind of cool. I'm going to go talk, I'll talk to him. And he was cool. He was knowledgeable. He was nice. He took his time to speak with me and help me. And he told me a couple things and that he was spot on with. And he said to me, you and I might never see each other again. We never did. I couldn't even tell you his first name. And he said, you need to get help because this will, come up and overpower you. It could come up in 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 years, whatever. And, so I did. I reached out and I took help and I seeked out, therapy and counseling and whatnot. And it was beneficial. It helped. I'm glad I did it. I felt like it had mentally prepared me and stuff to go into that environment. And like, knowing what I know now, you need to be like impenetrable in there, because if you're not, and you don't have your antenna up and your situational awareness up, you might be getting filled with bad information, bad thing, like everything. There's so many things you hear in there, whether it be entertaining, even like to listen to and stuff, but like it can also infiltrate you and it can kind of start to like wear at you and make your mind think that. So like if you're not really paying attention and know, like I got to get through this and I got to stay right, I got to do the right things, I got to make the right moves, and I have a life after this when I get out that I care about and I want to, follow up with and have a prosperous, like, real life, not filled with this kind of situations. And I can't be glad about what happened to in my situation, but I can look at what I can look at, and I can look at the silver linings that did reveal themselves. And I was 25 when I had my accident. No kids. I wasn't married. All those things that it would have made the situation that much more complex. And there would have been that much more damage, like, and I use this word like hostages, you know what I mean? I could have had kids that I was drinking and partying and not showing the right things to, and a wife that was, just more chaos and dysfunction. And so I have to thank, whatever powers to be that was quelled, and that I was able to make my mind up and kind of keep my eye on the prize in essence to follow it up. And I can tell you it has been so hard. I haven't had a license in 13 years now. And the total length of that is 17 years. So I'm like 4 years out. My children are 8 and 6, and I've never had a license. So it's provided a complex set of dynamics for my family to deal with, and it's hard too to think that my poor decisions over a decade ago, my kids are feeling the effect of that. And it's tough to say that and acknowledge that and know it, that my kids are actually kind of suffering from my decision making made 13 years ago. And that's powerful. Like, that to me is like, holy wow, like it's that powerful, and it's still that powerful, and it always will be. And part of the reason I'm even taking this opportunity, I've spoken these words that I'm speaking right now to many of my friends, to many of my family members. And, I think it's important for me to keep saying it, because this is me, this is my life, this is how my life went, this is how it's going. And it doesn't have to be a derailment. You know, it can be a major accident, and but we can rebuild. And I think there's so many different ways to do that. I don't think a lot of the ways that we're typically used to seeing, I don't think they're as effective as we need them to be, and we're not getting the results from a lot of it. So, you know, I'm hoping that maybe my whole story can turn into something that maybe influences that type of reform, or and also paralleling that is like the reformative justice and restorative justice. And I think that's like an avenue that people like myself would bring a good perspective to, or a good real life testament to, like, hey, you know, what are your thoughts on this? I think we don't do enough of that in society. Of like, we do a lot of research, we know a lot of stuff, we learn, and we know like margins and how to sell things and how to attract people and stuff. But like, why not get real life feedback from the people that have lived it, the people that have showed the system that, you know, they could provide feedback, or they could help fix and create. And, you know, I hope that we see more of that in life. And I only think it's going to come from people like yourself that are doing what you're doing, and giving other people like me the inspiration to come on. And, you know, who knows if things go the way I would love to see them go, this might be the very start, the birth of maybe me following along in your footsteps, maybe not in the exact same way, but like in a trajectory that's close to it, or has maybe a different kind of message that I would like to focus on versus what you focus on, but, you know, along the same kind of foundations. And I think this is like, it's the only way in which we can be, because let's face it, and I'm sure you can kind of understand what I'm saying right now, but it's very hard to even voice your opinions or your feelings to courts. They don't really give you the time. There's no time to do that. Nobody takes the time to ask you that, and there's no time in sentencing and in front of the judges and jurors and court personnel to even explain any sort of reason, even if your explanation was why you commit your crime. I think that's important. I think that would help the judge sentencing you, you know? And let's put it on a really trivial hypothetical. A guy goes to the store and steals a turkey. Well, are his kids at home going to die of starvation? I think if his kids are home starving and he stole a turkey, we should admire him. He just did anything it took to feed his children. And I know that's like I said, a really like kind of polarizing, you know, example, but they don't ask you anything. They don't care like about what your background is and what you came through, or what might have been leading to you making that decision.
Not everything is so black and white in the criminal justice system.
Right. It's actually, in fact, I think about 99% of it lands in the gray area. You know, and that's why I think like what's written on a piece of paper about a crime is it's so circumstantial. It's so hard, and I don't have a lot of faith in that. Like, you can put a number down on a piece of paper that says for this crime you got to do this, because there's so many circumstances that go into it. And I think it needs to be more, you know, they need to spend more time in the court. They can't rush through things. And, you know, I could go on for a long time, but you see it now. And with the you know, the more capabilities we have to live stream and put things on the internet for people to see them, you know, it's making it harder for these institutions and systems to kind of like restrict, you know, and keep it not as known. So that's a good thing for this industry. And I hope that we see it have like positive effects. And I think we are starting to see it, because we all kind of know that if something's happening in the public's eye, it's harder for anybody to, you know, make a decision on something that isn't like forthright, or it's not, you know, if it's corrupt, for lack of a better word, or it's not a proper way that the process is supposed to take out. A lot of us don't even realize it or know it or understand it. So we're kind of just getting pinballed through a system. And that's alarming to see.
Do you think that your sentence was too light? Was it fair, or was it too harsh?
That's a great question. Obviously, I stated earlier that no sentence they could have given me would have been like, wouldn't have fixed any of the loss. I think my overall experience with my circumstance, I think I'm okay with it. I think it was okay. I think I actually was on the light end. And obviously I would appear a little biased of saying I think that's fitting or I think it was okay. I recognize and understand I think I did good in a selfish way. I'm happy that I only had to do, you know, was only sentenced 2.5 years. But I think that's light. I think it's light for a loss of life. You need deterrent, you know, and who better than me to sit here today and stress the importance of deterrent. I would never sit here and say, yeah, no, I shouldn't have got that much time. Because what I did was highly irresponsible, and it created a lifetime of loss for a lot of people. So I think I got short amount of time. I can tell you about a situation or a person that I was incarcerated with. He was out of the Lawrence or Lowell area. His ethnicity was like, I would say Spanish or, you know, Central American maybe. He had a domestic situation with his wife, and him and his wife were both under the influence of alcohol, and fleeing his home because of the situation that was at hand, he ran one of his children over, backing out the driveway. And he got 10 years. He was in my unit, and I used to look at him every day and think, that poor guy, you know, he got 10 years. I got 2.5. I almost felt bad. Like, you know what I mean? It made me feel like, oh, Jesus, I don't even want to tell him. I wouldn't even, like, it just made me sad to think that that guy was going to sit in there for 10 years. And he ran his child over. Like, he's crushed. And that was kind of it was a weird feeling, because I kind of felt like it wasn't fair for him. You know, my sentence wasn't fair for this guy. And it's crazy. You see that kind of stuff. So I am fortunate and grateful for how everything went, and, you know, that I was able to get through it and do it. And but at the same time, I'd like to take a minute to mention this, because I find it almost interesting a little bit. The 17-year loss of license has been by far the hardest and most debilitating thing to deal with. it's really punishing my family now, 13 years later. If I didn't reform by now, I don't think I would. But I can't say that for sure because I think I'm in the reforming part of it. You know, I think I chose that and I think I stayed in it. I maybe didn't do it perfectly, but I'm doing it one day at a time. And without the license, life's been just very limited, reserved, kind of restricted. And I can say I've done a lot for someone who doesn't have a license, you know. I have really made my mind up, like, and stuck to it, that I'm not going to let it hold me down and hold me back. And I've done that pretty well. But I got to say, I don't have an issue right now admitting to you and to the whole world. I'm more beaten down right now than I have been in a long time, or maybe ever. And it is all because of the license. It makes every single decision, like, complicated. It makes every ounce of planning complicated. And again, it's really making my kids kind of be limited, and you know, so they're feeling the effect of it, and that feeling that I have is hard. That's hard. It bothers me a lot, and so I'm just trying to, like, I got to be strong. You know what I mean? Because if I let those things that bother me a lot bring me down, then I'm not a good father. I'm not a good anything. You know what I mean? So I have to. I can't let all these things impenetrate me, you know? And like I said earlier, you got to be, like, impenetrable. And that's hard, you know? That's like when I had my accident, I feel like I got softer, which was a good thing. You know, I softened up. I kind of peeled off some of the layers of the armor that your, you know, typical male ego has, you know, and this and that. And I didn't want to fight or hurt anyone, or, like, even boxing. Like, I just said, when I got out of jail, I just said, I don't really want to punch someone in the head anymore. Like, it was like gone. It took it away from me, and in a good way. Like, I feel like I didn't need that. That's anger. That can be anger, even though boxing is a sport and whatnot. You know what I mean? Like, I just kind of lost it, and in a good way, and that, all that stuff, like, it plays into, like, how this can affect people and what it can do to you. It's powers you don't even know how it works and stuff like that, and that's why I know when I look back at things and I'm like, you got to really pay attention. I have to be aware, because that pastor told me this, and he was right. And this is now 13 years later, and I'm having a harder time right now than when I was going to jail, than when I was, like, really in the thick of it. And so that, to me, shows me if drugs and alcohol make people kind of beat down and you make bad decisions and it complicates your life, well, mental health and stress can do the same thing, and they're a byproduct of the trauma that I've, you know, ingrained in my life. So I got to be cognizant. I have to be, you know, on top of things and be proactive.
You know, it's interesting that you brought up the loss of license, because I think this segment really shines a light on alternative methods of incarceration. And I'm sure the judge considered that and thought of that in your sentence. And I also think it's a interesting perspective to see someone who, you know, this didn't happen yesterday where it's in the news and it's a light sentence. Because that's what jumped out at me from an outsider's perspective. And when we see, like, in rape cases and, you know, different cases across the country where there's been a lot of light cases for, you know, historically, like, a white male, and people are outraged by that.
Sure.
But they're in the moment on that, and they don't kind of see what the full conclusion is. So I think in your situation, you have a case where you see the rehabilitation all these years later, and you can look back, and it puts the shoes on another foot, and it really shines light on that perspective. And granted, that doesn't work for everyone.
Right.
There's going to be people that this does not work for them, and there are very, I don't agree that like a sex offender or something should be getting like a 2-year sentence. And there's a rule for everything. Sure. And then there's all of these outliers, but I think it definitely, to see it come full circle, I think you weigh it as, do you give someone like you a 20-year sentence, or do you do what they did and you're suffering with that every day,
Right.
Because I've also seen on the other end of the stick, you could have been living like a king in prison, and maybe this loss of license is worse than that. So I think it really it gives you something to think about. We as humans on the outside world that are very quick to look at the media and the headlines and everything and see that and to have these conversations and be honest and open about it.
Yeah, that is a great point. And, along the lines, and I think that is a part of the duty that I have to almost offer that feedback. You know what I mean? Because, and I'm not speaking down of anybody else or putting myself on a pedestal or anything like that, but I think it is unique in a way. I think I am unique in a way where I have always felt comfortable or confident enough to speak truth to like power. Even, and I could go on, I mean, your typical episodes are probably within an hour or 2 hours. We could go for 8. And if I told you all the things, but I am a person, and I think kind of like you in a sense, where I almost push everything to the envelope, like I feel, push it to the max in a good and bad way. And I've gotten results that I think other people may not get if they did the same thing I did. And that to me is that's something that I think, I don't know if I struggle with or we all struggle with or what, but when we're, as people in a society, we like to know things, right? And we like to know what's going to happen when you do certain things. Like it goes back to, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I think that I've always chosen a different way to deliver. Or maybe I should explain it as, me and you look at something, I see something different from what 9 other people see. I'm not wrong. They're not wrong. It's just how my brain works or how I look at things. And I've always been able to voice that to whoever it is. And sometimes I think we're a little bit reserved, or we're nervous, or we're scared to tell a judge how we feel. And my life kind of got so cracked open with that accident. Like everything was so exposed and so happening so fast and real and raw. And I feel everything, and I juggle a lot, and I'm always that's me. And I also jeopardized probations, paroles, everything. I mean, I had numerous violation hearings, surrender hearings, going in front of the judge with no attorney for these probation surrender hearings. Again, kind of because I didn't think they were really that important. I thought this was kind of like a joke. This is a surrender hearing because I was 7 minutes late coming home from work for a home visit, and I'm being surrendered. I got to take a day off of work. I don't have a driver's license. I got people driving me here. And again, I don't want to sound like a complainer, but this is just my life going fast. I'm missing this. I'm on drug testing and alcohol testing, and drugs weren't even really a part of my incarceration. So I'm like, that in those little bits, I'm kind of like, hey, what's up with this? Why am I on drug testing? I've never been convicted of drug charges. I've never been caught with drugs on me. Why do I have to take drug testing? But anyway, like, irregardless, I had to do all this stuff. And it is what it is. I've experienced it all, and I get it. And it's just like, it's a lot of stuff that doesn't really mean anything. But I got to see how these little things that might not mean anything to me could land me right back in jail. And it's just that reminder of, like, this woman who I did a lot of therapy with, Maureen Whitehouse. She's a spiritual advisor, and she studies at the Harvard School of Divinity. And she focuses through, like, the Course in Miracles. And she's a very interesting, very helpful woman. And she said to me, most people have a sidewalk to walk on. You have a razor's edge. If you go a little left or a little right, you fall off. You don't have a sidewalk to kind of stumble around and keep you going in the same direction. You have a razor. Like, a little decision like that is going to knock you off. And, like, these little things that people said to me along the way, I got to feel they're like, okay, that's what she meant. That's what he meant. That's what that meant, It was kind of interesting, and I got to keep it tight, because I don't have the typical layout that is, offered to us in this world that we kind of take for granted. And you mentioned something earlier, and I now live in this world as me, a convicted felon. And I'll never forget trying to get an apartment when I got out of jail. I paroled into my brother's wife's parents' house. They had some extra rooms and whatnot, so I paroled in there. And it was a tough transition because I didn't have a license. Everything was hard for that. But it also, when it came time to get my own apartment, I'll never forget filling out the applications. And on there, it asks you if you've ever been arrested or have you ever been convicted of a felony. And filling out the applications, yes, please explain, write a good little thing, And we must have filled out 50 applications, and we're not even getting a call back. And I'm like, I had to have this conversation with my wife and say, hey, I think I'm going to lie on the next one, And I go, I've been thinking about this. I go, we're handing this piece of paper to a homeowner. Like, it's not going to a police station, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to lie because we're clearly not getting any responses. And nothing for nothing, but I think my wife and I were, like, in the upper echelon of, like, the, caliber of people showing up to these places. And I'm like, why are we getting bypassed? And that's it. That's it. You do the right thing and answer the question truthfully and honestly, and you just disqualified yourself. So it's like, how do you traverse this life in these, with these stipulations or conditions that will follow us forever? And it's sometimes you almost have to do the wrong thing for the right reason. And that's a hard thing for your average Joe to understand. You know what I mean? Because that can trip people up like me, like us, that we're trying to do the right thing. Because you start doing little things the wrong way, and you might start doing big things the wrong way. So it's a hard, it's a game of chess in which how we maneuver. And I've said it before. If you want to get an apartment, or if I want to get an apartment, well, I might have to apply to 150 and you might only have to apply to 3. But that's the parameters that I now live under.
And now you can send them this episode.
Yes, right. And say, how you doing? Here I am.
Now, there's a lot of lessons to take away from this episode, but if you had to pick one to kind of summarize, everything you've learned, and you can put that into one person that's in your shoes, or when you were in those initial shoes back then, what would that lesson be? So
I think what I would try to capture and have be understood, or it would have to be the amount of loss. It's damn near like impossible to get through it without having it affect a lot of things negatively. And I would have to say, given all my own objective observation of myself, and with nobody, just real honest, I think that can be hard for me, because I'm so honest with myself that I hold myself kind of like I'm my own worst executioner. I really put a lot of pressure on myself. So knowing all these things, and I don't want this to be misconstrued with any sort of gauge or barometer on my parents' job, raising me. Because I think they did a good job. They taught me, I knew right from wrong. I know morals and values, and, so I think they did a good job on that end. But the only thing I can do maybe, or that I would like to say will stay with me the best, is my children are 8 and 6. And again, I want to say it because I mean it. My parents did a good job. But for some reason, I didn't have that real, rational fear for the law and for things that put other people in danger. So kind of leading back to being reckless, or being, going down kind of a slippery slope. And I think the only thing I could emphasize is that I now have that opportunity as a parent. And parenting is very hard. And I never thought I was going to say that, because I had it all figured out when I was 16. But you don't have shit figured out, and I still don't have shit figured out. And I probably will never have shit figured out, because every single day is different. Every decision is different. There's no playbooks. But I want to instill and impart on my kids and any other kids that I can, not too seriously, but try to start to relay how serious their decisions will be. And how the little ones lead to the big ones, and you string them all together. And at the end of it is really what your decision made. And that's hard at young ages to realize, whether to tie your shoe or not. Could change how long your hip lasts for in your life. So and my point is, these little idiosyncrasies and these ebbs and flows and things that we don't even really pay any mind to affect us. And obviously the bigger ones affect us more, but the little ones are just as effective, because when strung together, they make a big one. So I think it's important for us to for me to focus on, with my kids, making sure that they understand the full ramifications and the full gravity of their decisions, because before they know it, when they're 16 years old, they could very well be in a situation exactly like I was in. And I also took out of this something in a very roundabout way. and your question kind of brought it up. I also want to stress to my children, as they get into those critical ages and influential ages where they're going to be peer pressured, there's going to be drinking involved, there's going to be drugs maybe involved, there's going to be things happening that hopefully they'll make good decisions at good times. And again, no misconstruing why I say this, but my kids, and I did this a lot of times, and we drank and drove where I grew up. Like we all did. I did, my friends did, we all did. It was like, and again, I'm ashamed and it's hard to admit, but like I can remember friends of mine actually uttering the words, "I'm driving with Murray. He's the best drunk driver." And like that just rings in my head. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my God, it's awful to hear that. But I'm going to teach my kids that if they get into someone else's car drunk, knowing that the driver's drunk and they're drunk, and they bring an open can into that car, they're putting their friend in a bad situation. And I don't mean this like I made a bad decision to drive. But April's father, and this is why I bring this up, another one of the things that he was just a miracle of a man to do and say and think this way. He said to me, and I forget exactly at what point of the, everything or where we were when he said it, but he said something to me that like, my daughter made a decision to get in your car just like you made a decision to drive it. And for no other reason that man was able to show me that sympathy. It is so powerful to me. But also, I've thought of that for so long. And I don't, like, it kind of almost bothers me that he even puts any sort of, like, fault or responsibility on her. But at the same time, I've looked at it and thought about it and like analyzed it so much that I thought one day, I said, okay, well, that also puts a little bit of power into the person getting in the car. By them getting in the car, whether they know it or not, they're putting, if a drunk driver gets in the car, of course he could kill somebody in another car. But if that drunk driver gets in a car alone and doesn't hit another car and has a single vehicle accident, he can only kill himself. So by getting in that car, I introduce the possibility of him getting a vehicular homicide charge. And that's a very roundabout kind of way, and I don't know if you follow it or not. But I can teach my kids, like, hey, listen, don't ever put your friend in that situation. Not only for your own safety, but for them too. And that's weird, but I understand that because I wouldn't do that to somebody else knowing what I've been through. And it's a good way, I think, if we taught kids that, it might be a different, something in their head might sink because that's like being a good friend. I'm looking out for my friend by doing something or not doing something. I can change what he's subjected to. So that's a weird way of looking at it, I know. But it's interesting to me for some reason because it's like, how do we deter people? So I also thought of maybe a law or something that you could lobby for. If the cops pull us over and you have an open beer in my passenger seat, maybe you get a $500 fine to you, not the driver, but to the person in the passenger seat. Because what else will deter it? It puts, if we don't have something that will deter that person from bringing that beer in the car or even getting in that car, then it puts all that on a 16-year-old driver maybe. You know what I mean? They don't have the, so I think we need to teach our own people. And that's why I can't teach someone else. I don't know who the driver will be in 5 years from now that my daughter might be getting in the car with. So if I teach my daughter not to get in a car that you've been drinking or the person's been drinking, you avoid that situation. And when people drink, you have to remember that all, or not all rationality, but sometimes rationality and reasoning and logic go out the window. They're gone. So I think it's important for me as an observative, objective father, take all the things that I've felt and witnessed and had come out of this type of situation and, apply it to my parenting. And again, that kind of puts me in that category of like being a little unorthodox or whatever, but so be it. I've been that my whole life. And I find when I am being unorthodox and I'm kind of doing things in a different fashion, that's good for me. That means things are working, because back to like the 9 out of 10 people, I see something different. So I have to go with what I believe. It's usually real. And, that's kind of, there's so much like that comes out of it, and I got to also keep it a little simple, and try to keep life simple. And that's something that has, kind of stemmed from slowing things down, not going too fast, not wanting things too fast, being a little more patient. I think there were so many lessons delivered to me that I probably needed all the extreme learning curve, you know what I mean? And if you're that believer of God gives you what you can handle or what you need practice with or whatever, well, I got a lot of it, and I'm still a work in progress, but it's compelled me to tighten up. And that's interesting how you asked that, what after all these years, what sticks. And it's kind of a tough answer, but that really is what sticks out to me, you know what I mean? I gotta look within. Like, it's not other people's problems, it's us, and I can only really influence my 2 kids and anybody else I have the opportunity to do so in the right fashion. So I'm gonna continue, and that's hopefully a journey that a lot more pathways open up on. So I don't know like how we're doing for time and whatnot, but there is a couple of things I would like to maybe touch upon, kind of on a little bit different of a topic. But during my incarceration at Plymouth County, I worked in the property department. And that was, I think I'll be able to say until the day I die, probably the most interesting job I'll ever have for a lot of reasons. But I got to see every inmate coming into the jail and every inmate leaving. I signed them in, I signed them out, I did their paperwork, it was an interesting job. And I worked kind of hand in hand with a couple of COs, and the COs in the property department were different from the COs in the units, because they would switch the COs in the units every 60 days, and they worked a different schedule and different hours and whatnot. In the property department, they bid for that job, so they stay in there for like a year, and then they bid again if they like it. So you might have the same. My whole time, I had the same COs every day, so you do get a little bit of a relationship. I had a good routine. I would read 3 papers a day. I always kind of joked I read the papers before the COs did. When they got delivered into the property room, they went right to me, and I'd read them, and then I'd hand them off to the COs. And that was only because of the way my schedule was broken up work-wise. It wasn't because I was more important than the COs, obviously. But I had a routine. It was an interesting routine. It kept me, going through motions. It kept the days ticking by. It kept me kind of plugged in. However, there came a lot of nuances and politics and whatnot in that job in itself, of like that, there was some inherent dangers. I was in close proximity and in charge of inmates' property when it was being stored. So, like, God forbid, I had a partner, another inmate that worked with me. So let's say the other inmate was stealing something out of someone's property box. Now, I could be inadvertently blamed for that. They come down for court the next morning. My job is I would change all the inmates for court every day. There'd be like 75 guys going to court. Come down to the tank starting at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and they'd give their box to me. They'd hand it right to me, and I'd bring it in and put it in their spot, and if they'd get their box back at the end of the day if they came back from court. If they didn't, it would get broken down. So there was a lot of enemy situations there in the morning time where there'd be a lot of fights in the holding tanks, co-defendants, that type of situations that maybe got through the staffing. And so you'd see a lot of that. And it was kind of it was interesting. You didn't know what was going to happen at any given moment. So I liked it. It was interesting. It kept me going. But the most interesting thing by far was I was the property officer during Whitey Bulge's trial. So every day they would take him in and out of the facility, and I would deal with him. And it was just kind of, for me, being a guy that lived 20, 25 minutes outside of the city that he was from, and ran, and hearing about it my whole life, and, being there and seeing him and being that up close and personal, and just seeing it from my perspective now. We spoke about my dad and his career at the jail and this and that. So I would hear verbiage, and I would hear my father talk about, being firm, fair, and consistent. I would hear him talk about security and whatnot, and they, he had all this stuff. So complacency, all these terms, from a correctional officer perspective that I'm hearing my father, and now I'm seeing it in real life. And day one of the Whitey trial, they're bringing them down past property, and they tell me I got to go inside the property department and close the door. So I do. Day two, they tell me to go in, but they leave the door open. Day three, they don't even make me go in. I'm in the hallway with them. Day four, I'm passing things hand to hand. I mean, I got to see the complacency just deteriorate. And I often remember thinking to myself, and I'll try to say this as gracefully as I can. I often remember thinking to myself, like, wow, if I was really, a loose cannon, I have a lot of opportunity right here that I could really kind of do anything, And that kind of was like, I saw what my dad was talking about, and I saw why it's important and stuff, because like if I wasn't, had somewhat of a locked on and an end result, that I wanted to get to, an assault or, to get your name in the paper, whatever, it was so right there for me. But I found it more interesting just for the simple fact that I was able to be that close to him every day and hear and listen and talk to him. And I was able to acquire some stuff that had his signatures on it. And, I don't even like to call it an autograph, because I know it's kind of bitter, you know what I mean? You're emulating someone who did really bad stuff, but without getting too buried in that stuff or lost in that stuff, I still have to remember, this is one of the most infamous gangsters in history, so in that sense alone, it was interesting. And being a property inmate, we also have a lot of contact with the other inmates. You're propositioned a lot to get stuff, do this, do that, whatever. So I knew that going into it. But I was like Santa Claus leaving the property department every single day, and certain COs would allow it, and some of them were really decent guys, and they were nice, and they had hearts and compassion and stuff. Some of them were real jerks, and they talked down to you, and they made you feel shitty. And, like one guy said to me, yeah, sure, I trust you like an inmate, and I just wanted to, give him the finger and say, you have no clue about me, I'm more of a man than you are, so save it. But there's no point in getting into that type of stuff. And it's hard because that kind of can, if you're not impenetrable and you can let that stuff bounce off you, it becomes you. And you become what they think you are and all that. It's a dangerous, slippery slope. But I'd be leaving the property department with a bag full of pillows, extra sheets, new Bobos, everything. The guys loved me. They'd be out in the handball court. They'd rip their Bobos up, and I'd have them a brand new pair that night, And it was an interesting thing. And I'll never forget one day I'm coming down they called it the spline, and I got a big old sack of stuff I'm bringing to my thing, and the COs are all telling me, well, oh, you had a shakedown last night. And I'm bringing a bag that's like everything they took, I'm bringing it back the next day. And the workers unit was awesome because you always get extra pillows. And it took a little while, but would regain everything actually, it didn't take a while. It was very short in there, a while is different time frames and stuff, what you should expect and what you can expect. But it was just like a whole different world within a world. And I was
only some experience.
Yeah, it's a lot of people they don't even have a clue. They don't understand even when you tell them.
That's why people are so interested in this type of show.
Yeah. And just to kind of touch upon that a little bit, I was listening to on my way here on the Amtrak. We talk about some of these really, really bizarre things people do. And again, I'll keep it graceful because I got an 8 and 6-year-old, and eventually they'll probably watch this show. And I hope that they do. And I hope that they can, be proud of who I am and what I did, throughout. Because it hasn't been easy. And they've, without them knowing, they know. They know that somehow life's a little tougher for me. They see it. They see all these other dads getting in their car and going grocery shopping and dropping them off, and they see that their mom has to do all the driving and has to do everything. And I don't really want to have that conversation yet. They're a little young, but they're also in the day and age of they'll be Googling my name. And do I want the Patriot Ledger to pass along my story, or do I want myself to? Because back to what you had said, the Patriot Ledger added a few things that might even not been true, were wrong, misinformation, whatever. They don't deliver it like I would. And let's face it, kids are impressionable, and they're, they're really that's going to be a hard thing, but I don't want to be beaten to the punch on it. So I don't want to prematurely pull the trigger. So I'm kind of, that's something that still I'm going to think on it for a while. And
you give them the link to this episode.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I was coming down the spline one day of the jail, and I happened to walk, shoulder to shoulder to J.W. Carney, who was Whitey Bulger's attorney. And so there was just all these things that, I got to take with me instead of being like, oh, I was incarcerated, I'm a convicted felon. Well, I talked to Whitey Bulger, and I met his attorney, and I did all these things in there that nobody will probably ever be able to do. And good, bad, or indifferent, it's part of my kind of thing. And I wanted to make it to a point where it wasn't all negative. You know what I mean? It was wow, I got that opportunity, and that was kind of cool. And in a weird way, so that's kind of how I've looked at it, because I don't want to be I don't want it to turn me into a sour, hardened person. You know what I mean? You don't have to be like that. I went in there, and I had respect from a lot of different races. And I kind of got that respect by giving that respect and just doing nothing. Nothing. I just walked, and I'd just not talk to anybody. And before you know it, one guy would come up to you and ask you a couple questions, and another guy, oh, hey, you seem kind of like a good guy. Well, from what? I didn't do anything. But that's how things happened, and like I had a good positive effect on it, or a good positive, like, I think I used the wrong word, but it was not a bad experience. It really, it got me to even further believe that there's good, and bad everywhere, and there's a lot of good in here in the jail, and a lot of talent too.
Absolutely. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for trusting me to share your story today
Yes.
on this platform. I think you did an amazing job for the first time doing it in this type of setting.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best with your business and your family in the future, and just keep being you and having that positive outlook.
Likewise, and thank you. With my utmost respect and inspiration for you to continue. And I think this was a start of something for me, and I owe a lot of it to you and your platform and what you're doing. And I just can't say enough about it. I think it's a tremendous, tremendous gift that you're giving to a huge community. And thank you again.